The fans don't care about the numbers. Fans care about you playing. And if you come back and it's 50 games, and then you're going to have more teams into the postseason, which allows the owners to recoup money that they're going to lose, they don't want to play a lot of games. The more regular season games they play, the more they lose. The more postseason games they play, the more money they make. Because the players don't make much money off the postseason. The owners make a lot of money off the postseason. That's why there's a financial tug of war here. It's just one big taffy pull. And I don't know if anything, it feels like the commissioner's eventually going to say, you must come back and play. I don't know if you're going to have some marquee players who say it's just not worth it. And you probably will. But if you look at the majority of, the players in Major League Baseball who aren't making, more than $1 million. I mean, that's the majority. They're going to come back because they need to come back. If some of the guys who make the bigger salaries don't want to, okay, that's on them. But this is far from over, even when these players come back, because there's already less trust between baseball owners and its players than in any other sport. It's not even close. And you're going to have them come back. We're going to force you to come back. And I just think that baseball is going to suffer again. And I couldn't help but think of 1998 because you had McGwire and Sosa, that documentary that aired last night. And look, it was just a trip down memory lane. I didn't learn much there, but it was still nice to reminisce about something that I was involved in, whether I was doing the highlights or the number of times that I went to games that McGwire and or Sosa were playing in. But back then, baseball was coming back. There was a feel-good part of that. That's why people love that so much. It was magical, historical, and it was baseball coming back from a strike. And that's where you had something that was special. Now you're going to have baseball coming back, and it's not special. You don't have McGwire and Sosa to bring you back. Like, there's nobody making a magical run in 50 games. Like Jacob deGrom winning his third consecutive Cy Young is just not enough to have everybody kind of go, wow, that's in the national conscience. Man, I can't wait to come back. DeGrom pitched last night? He's 7-4. He's going to win the Cy Young. Yes, McLevin.
But maybe someone steps up and does something spectacular.
But it's only 50 games.
Yeah, it's tough. But you can't accumulate enough numbers.
No, and baseball's all about that because of 162. I told you I would talk about it if I thought I could advance it here, and I haven't advanced it. There's a frustration level. I think just speaking as a fan right now. And the reason why it kind of came to the forefront is I was watching last night with McGwire and Sosa, and baseball was back. That was in the conversation. That was in the national conversation. And it was on the national news. Like, it was big. You had Ripken coming back, Ripken's consecutive game streak. Like, there were things that were surrounding this. And you sort of forgot where things were with baseball. But, man, it feels like we're a long ways away. We're more than 22 years away from what that feeling was like back in 1998. Chris Mannix, the intrepid Sports Illustrated senior NBA writer's most recent column, NBA must not let the season's return distract from Black Lives Matter movement. And Chris joins us now from Boston. How did this start, Chris, that you had some of these players bringing up their concerns about if we play basketball, it takes away from what is going on, this social platform that they have right now?
Well, Dan, Kyrie Irving was the driving force behind this recent call. And his message to the 80-plus players that were on this call was that, there should be some consideration put into the fact that once we go down there and start playing again, the narrative shifts entirely. And look, he's not wrong. I mean, when players show up in Orlando, media that's been clamoring to, get a piece of them for the better part of the last few months will start writing about LeBron James's chase for a championship and Ben Simmons' return to Philadelphia. And, what is the status of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George with the Clippers? And, there are players, Irving, the most vocal among them, that believe this is a time in this country's history, a movement where that kind of distraction just simply shouldn't take place. So that was the the impetus behind that phone call to let players speak out on issues like this as they try to make a decision.
Okay, but in the end, ultimately, it feels like it's LeBron James's decision here. Even Patrick Beverley, who doesn't get along with LeBron, tweeted out, "LeBron wants to hoop. We're hooping here." Is there? I just don't know Kyrie Irving's plan, Chris. If he has a detailed plan of if we don't play basketball, then what do we do? And can you do both in your bubble in Orlando?
No, look, LeBron's position, which has been an ongoing position for him, dating back to 2017. I wrote about the time when Donald Trump was going after the NFL players for kneeling. LeBron said specifically, "My voice is stronger than my knee." And he's always held that position that if he's out there in the forefront, he can do more good than if he boycotts something or takes a more divisive stand. So I think a lot of players will follow suit. I think Kyrie Irving's only plan and his push to players was, look, just don't show up, and you send a pretty strong message about the strength of this movement. Don't be part of the ultimate distraction. I mean, look, I have a hard time, Dan, as a white man kind of quibbling with Kyrie on this. I've never walked a mile in his shoes. I've never experienced some of the things that he's experienced. So if he feels this strongly that not showing up sends a stronger message than showing up, it's fine to have a difference of opinion with LeBron. It's just the way Kyrie, and I can tell you a number of other players feel.
Yeah, I agree with you. I said this from the outset. Sometimes we'll shoot the messenger and not listen to the message. And I think Kyrie can be polarizing. And I want to listen to the message. And I'm right there with you. I don't know what he's experienced. I just want to know if there is no basketball, is there a plan, or is that the statement they're going to make? This is so important. We are going to forego an NBA season. Plus, Kyrie not playing, that probably may draw, a little bit of a, well, wait a minute here. If he was playing and LeBron wasn't playing, would, he be saying the same thing? And maybe that's not fair, but the fact that he's not going to be playing and LeBron has a chance at another championship, they worked hard all season to get the number one seed, all of these things. So, I don't know, you kind of throw it into the pot here, and I'm not sure what the commissioner thinks about all of this, and how does he troubleshoot this?
Well, to your point, Dan, from a public perception standpoint, there really could not have been a worse messenger than Kyrie Irving, because of the fact that he's not playing and he spent the better part of the last 2 years viewed as one of the more divisive forces in the NBA with the locker room and everything that happened in Boston and his subsequent move over to Brooklyn. All that being said, there's going to be a season. Like, the NBA is not even remotely considering the possibility of not coming back. There's just not a belief, and I think this belief, this feeling is strong enough that there's not a belief there's not going to be enough players that decide not to go. There'll be a few players, maybe even more than a few players, that decide not to go, but not enough that would deter the NBA or the union, for that matter, which has been in lockstep with the NBA throughout this process, from not bringing the game back. The question is, in the next couple of days and weeks, what kind of statements will the NBA send? What kind of actions will they take to try to convince the players that are on the fence about this that coming back is the right thing? Will it be some form of donation or a commitment to do something while you're in Orlando that will keep the spotlight on this social justice movement? I think that's something, I know that's something the NBA is discussing actively, and will probably have something to reveal in the coming days and weeks. We're talking to Chris Mannix of Sports Illustrated, senior NBA writer. I was also wondering, you have Dwight Howard and Avery Bradley on the same team as LeBron James. This isn't cause for concern? At this point, no. If we get to a different point, maybe. Look, Dwight Howard's agent's already come out and said, he hasn't made any decisions yet. Dwight had that statement, but then his agent kind of countered it. And I don't think Avery Bradley's made any strong decisions yet either. I think, knowing Avery Bradley a little bit, I think Avery just wants to see something come from the NBA, like I was talking about, some sort of plan to keep the pressure on or keep the spotlight on this particular issue. But Dan, it's important to note too that players are not speaking with one voice on all this. I mean, there are myriad issues out there that players are kind of sifting through at this moment. I mean, health concerns continue to be real. I mean, the NBA is talking about a bubble, but the fact that Disney employees might be able to come and go as they please, I mean, it makes it more of a spaghetti strainer than it is an actual bubble. I mean, you've got players that are going to be quarantined in there, but others that are staff workers might be coming in and out. I mean, I don't care how much personal protective gear you're wearing or how much distance you're keeping from players, you're still running a risk that you can cause infection. So that's a concern. And let's be real, Dan. For a lot of players, mostly the guys in their 20s, there are lifestyle issues here. Like, not a lot of guys are eager to go quarantine down to Orlando for several months, especially the ones that don't play golf and that might just feel like they're just stuck in one place, doing nothing.
And I was wondering about that, just the physical condition could decide who wins this championship, because once you get there in late July, then it starts. You don't have much ramp-up time. I've seen pictures of James Harden working out. Looks like he's lost 15 pounds, but here's a guy who has asthma who's going to be going down into that bubble there. I don't know what LeBron has been doing or the Greek Freak has been doing, but, that could go a long way in deciding who's going to win this championship, is just who's in the best shape.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was talking to Brett Brown, the Sixers coach, about this just yesterday. And one of the things that Brett said was, as important as physical shape is, it's about kind of your mental state as you go down to Orlando. I mean, this is going to be a completely new situation where at a bare minimum, you're probably going to be there 30, 40 days. And if you're successful, significantly longer. How mentally steeled are you for this type of kind of setup? And also, how well do you get along with your teammates? Like, you're going to be in proximity with these guys for a significant amount of time. Like, do you have the kind of camaraderie that you probably need to have to survive? I mean, these things, at least to a coach like Brett Brown, and I'm sure others, these things are just as important as the physical issues.
That stove behind you, be honest, how many times have you used that in the last year?
Do we include pasta?
All right, I'll let you sneak that in. If I got rid of pasta, how many times have you used that stove?
Oh, I mean, I think my old softball gloves inside the actual stove. I don't think that's actually been used. I mean, if you look behind me at the fridge, if I open it up, I'm pretty sure there'd be, I don't know, like 3/4 pound of salami.
Can you
Girl
open
Scout
it up?
Cookies. I'm not doing that. There's no way. There's no way that's happening. I'm afraid of what's in there, to be quite honest.
Case of Bud Light in there, some Gatorade.
Easily,
right?
Easily.
Yeah.
I'm into Sobe water now, so that's kind of probably a bunch of that. No.
Soft. Hey, good to talk to you. I also saw where the Players Association doesn't expect fans at NBA games next season.
Well, a little bit too soon to tell.
Yeah.
On that one. I mean, it's one of the questions that's going to be coming up, Dan, is will the NBA keep fans out of stands completely, or will they look at states that are allowing things to happen and say, you can put fans in stands? I mean, this is going to be something that comes up because owners of those teams are going to say, like, if you're Mark Cuban in Dallas or, in San Antonio or the Rockets, like where Texas is starting to open up significantly already, are you going to say, look, you're going to cost me all that revenue when my state says I can open up and have 3/4 of capacity? Florida, which we've seen open up already, a couple of teams down there. This is going to be a challenge. If there are states like New York and California that are still operating under significant restrictions, how will the NBA, how will they sort of thread that needle where they have these owners that are able to make money off fans and stands, but they can't do it because the rest of the league can't? That's a challenge, believe me, that the NBA is talking about right now.
Good to talk to you, Chris. Thanks as always. We appreciate your time.
All right, Dan.
Best and worst of the weekend. We'll give you ours. Let's go around the room. Let's take a spin around the room. Back left, Todd, best and worst of the weekend.
My best, the MLB Players Association rejecting the league's latest proposal and wanting to know by today, supposedly, what the game plan will be for season. It'd be great to set the schedule and move on already from all this. My worst.
Wait, that's your best?
That was my best because now they're forced to move something along instead of day after day after day. If they're going to hold to this Monday deadline today, maybe we're going to finally get the commissioner to say there's a season, deal with it, and here's the schedule. And then we have to keep talking about if they're going to play, when they're going to play, how many games.
This whole thing about baseball and when they're coming back and how many games, and maybe it's going to make it the regular season have a little tension because baseball's regular season doesn't have much tension. Usually with individual honors, you might have that, but there's just so many games. If you're going to have 48 or 50 games, then, these games they're all going to meet. Like you could go into a weekend series and lose that, and all of a sudden you could be in real jeopardy here in a couple of weeks, or when they start the regular season. But now you're going to force the players to come back. I can't imagine that next negotiating session that they have after next season, because it's not going to go well at all. The players will not forget this. Yes, Fritzy.
My worst of the weekend, the Athletic Shams Charania reporting the NBA Players Association of the belief no fans will be permitted to attend games during the entire 2020-21 season. The thought that they could even have this kind of conversation now that we wouldn't be able to go to any NBA games all next year is a little disheartening.
Yeah, see, I hate when we get so far down the road with this because we've done that with all of our sports where we say this date and then it's going to be this date. Now we're saying no fans in the stands coming up next season. College football is bringing fans back in Texas. I don't know where we're going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 3 weeks. Yes, McLovin, best and worst.
Best, obviously, my favorite golfer of all time, Daniel Berger, coming away with the win. Florida State grad.
Don't even try it. Don't even try it.
I had heard of him, though. Because
Don't
okay.
Even try.
My other sort of best worst, watching the NASCAR news, guess who came in? Our guy, Denny Hamlin, won. Chase Elliott came in. Sorry, Paulie. Chase Elliott came in second. What is the deal with Chase Elliott? Is his car made with rocket fuel? That dude is second, first, or third, and he's like in the lead late every race. I never even heard of him until this year. He's in every race. That's all I'm saying.
Seton O'Connor, best and worst.
My best of the weekend was Italian soccer being back, actually. Juventus played on Friday, which is just one more step.
Serie A.
You keep checking off all of these leagues coming back, and it feels like there's actually progress, whereas here, when you're watching the NBA, it feels like there's been zero progress. And MLB, despite the storylines keep changing every day, it doesn't actually feel like on Monday we're any closer to games being played.
Premiership comes back Wednesday? Is that
21st?
I think I'm pretty sure it's this weekend.
Yeah,
this weekend.
I think this Wednesday they're supposed to start it up. The 17th.
I thought I saw a promo.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, that could be
with
Wednesday
NBCSN,
then. Right.
with Rebecca Lowe talking about it coming back.
All right, chaps. Yeah, that was my best of the weekend, but sort of my bestie worstish mixed together. Because despite on Friday it felt like there was probably going to be more news here on Monday, I don't feel like we're actually any closer to games.
Polyester.
Best of the weekend, Denny Hamlin getting his 40th career win at Homestead. Not Homestead 40th, but his career win. And he got it at Homestead. Lots of weather delays with the NASCAR race. And I'm sitting there with my daughter as they're showing another delay. My daughter goes, she goes, why are there so many weather delays? I'm like, well, Miami and there's lots of weather. And she goes, why don't they race it inside in a dome? And I was like, well, I think the exhaust would be bad for the fans in the stands. But I'm guessing there's no physical way. I think there's like some race out in Oklahoma, like Chili Bowl. They race indoors. But my guess is 43 cars in a dome would be bad for the people in the stands.
Probably so.
Probably. But I don't know that for 100%.
Could be
the right fans, maybe. Meaning actual circular fans, not...
Carbon monoxide poisoning there.
NASCAR in a dome, if it ever happens, my daughter came up with the idea.
He's the founder of Pro Football Talk. He's on Pro Football Talk Live, co-host with Chris Sims. His latest article, Drew Rosenhaus, Colin Kaepernick should get signed. Is Colin Kaepernick represented by Drew Rosenhaus, his football rights, Mike?
No. Jeff Nally represents Colin Kaepernick and has for several years now. But Rosenhaus, a prominent agent, spoke to NBC News and shared that opinion. And I feel like this time around, more people are speaking openly about what the NFL needs to do as it relates to Colin Kaepernick. And I think we're just waiting to see if one of the 32 teams will do something, bring him in for a workout, negotiate with him on a contract, and maybe add him to the roster now that the mood seems to be a lot different than it was when the blackballing began 3.5 years ago.
Do we know if Kaepernick wants to play if he is going to be a backup quarterback?
Definitely wants to play, definitely willing to be a backup. I think it's going to be a challenge to work out the right contract because from one perspective, you could say, Dan, he should just take whatever he can get, even if it's the minimum salary. From the other perspective, and I think this is part of the notion that the pendulum is swinging the other way, you put Kaepernick's name and number on an NFL jersey of one of the 32 teams, that jersey probably becomes the highest selling jersey immediately. Coast to coast, that team develops a national following immediately. Teams do the hard knock show because they want to have a national following and it never happens. This is a way. If you're looking for a national platform, this is the way to do it. So there is value in having him on the team from a business standpoint, whereas 4 years ago, people were afraid to have him on the team from a business standpoint. And also, he's going to help your team get better. We've looked at a lot of the depth charts. And I start with the Houston Texans. Who fits better as the backup to Deshaun Watson given his skill set? A.J. McCarron or Colin Kaepernick? It's that simple. It's a no-brainer. It's Kaepernick, not McCarron.
I thought Kansas City would be a soft landing spot with Andy Reid. You got the most secure player in football in Patrick Mahomes. And I thought, they just won the Super Bowl. You could bring in Colin Kaepernick and Mahomes would welcome that. Because some of these quarterbacks, I wonder if Russell Wilson welcomed Colin Kaepernick. I just don't know what to make of that Pete Carroll story, Mike, because why would a coach call Pete Carroll or somebody in the front office? Pete Carroll didn't spend much time with Colin Kaepernick. I'd be calling Jim Harbaugh or Greg Roman before I'd be calling Pete Carroll. Explain that to me.
Well, and Jim Harbaugh has said publicly on the record, he's on PFT Live and said this a few years ago, Colin Kaepernick will help you win championships with an S, not one, but multiple. But he is a guy that people should be talking to. And the whole Seahawks thing is weird to me. They didn't sign him because they regard him as a starter. Well, why'd you bring him in for a visit then if you were looking for a backup when you regard him as a starter? He never had a workout with the Seahawks. They view him as a starter. I think back in 2017, they had deeper issues on that team. They had guys in that locker room that resented Russell Wilson that maybe would have lined up behind Colin Kaepernick if he was on the team and created a problem as to whether or not maybe Russell Wilson should be benched for Colin Kaepernick. I think that's one of the reasons they steered clear. But why even bring him in if that's the case? That's what's odd about it. But according to Carroll, somebody's doing their due diligence. Somebody's interested. And I really do think that the atmosphere is much different now than it was 3 years ago. And I'd like to think somebody's going to take a step back and say, hey, there may be a segment of the fan base that isn't happy about this. Well, to hell with them. If they want to huff and puff, go ahead. We've got a lot more people now who will embrace us for giving Colin Kaepernick the chance he's been denied for the last 3 years.
I've seen people speculate on where Colin Kaepernick could end up. And I don't know if you caught my interview with Doug Williams, who works with the Redskins. And I did say, hey, have you guys thought about Colin Kaepernick? And he goes, no, because of President Trump, the military that's in Washington, D.C., and now I get to your initiative where now we're looking at that nickname for, Washington's team. I don't know if Daniel Snyder would entertain that. I don't know if it would, hey, I can bring in Kaepernick, just let me keep my nickname. Like, I don't know how any of this works, but I don't put it past any of these owners. What do you make of Washington, D.C., first of all, with what Doug Williams said?
Well, I mean, if you sign Colin Kaepernick, there's a chance the first thing he says at his introductory press conference is, all right, let's change the nickname. Right? I've been waiting for somebody in that organization to stand up in this moment, Dan. If we are taking a stand against racism in all forms, if they are taking down the Christopher Columbus statue in Richmond, Virginia, where the team has its training camp, the conversation has expanded beyond racism against Black Americans, Native Americans who were shoved out of the way when the Europeans came over 500 plus years ago. Those Native Americans have a seat at this table too. And it's astounding to me. And we've been pushing this for a week and a half now. And I've been hoping and praying that somebody will catch on to it and run with it. And somebody from within the team. I mean, this is a time where it isn't courageous anymore to stand up and say the right thing and do the right thing. And I just keep waiting for whether it's the coach, whether it's one of the players, whether it's somebody to say, hey, you know what? We're taking a stand against racism. This name is a dictionary-defined slur. Now's the time to change it. And I keep waiting and hoping that to make this moment complete and to give the NFL a true way to impact. It's one thing to issue statements and videos and throw money at the problem, and that's fine. That's needed. But if you really want to prove that things are different, NASCAR gets rid of the Confederate flag, the NFL changes the Washington nickname, and repairs Colin Kaepernick, gets him to where he would be right now if he hadn't wrongfully been denied a job the last 3.5 years.
Talking to Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. Baker Mayfield, J.J. Watt, Bill O'Brien talking about taking a knee here. That's why I go back to, you kind of snuck that in with the Texans might be a great spot here. And knowing your relationship with Bill O'Brien, I wonder if Bill O'Brien, a coach, is going to take a knee. You got a secure quarterback in Deshaun Watson, and you could bring in Colin Kaepernick. Man, that might be able to put a nice little bow on this.
Hey, Dan, it's a no-brainer. And I thought of it last week when I combined the heartfelt message that Bill O'Brien had almost 2 weeks ago when he first addressed the George Floyd murder and his feelings on where things currently stand in the country. Bill O'Brien, who's both the coach and the GM of the Houston Texans. So he doesn't have to say, well, the GM didn't let me sign this guy. He has that authority. He attended the George Floyd funeral last week in Houston. Cal McNair, the owner of the team, was there. And that was the moment when Al Sharpton said, this isn't about putting Colin Kaepernick back to work. It's about repairing him. It's, the best argument now for not signing Colin Kaepernick is, well, he hasn't played in 3 years. Well, he hasn't played in 3 years because you've frozen him out for 3 years. It's not his fault. And you mentioned the Chiefs. I mean, if Andy Reid is the guy who gave Mike Vick a second chance after 2 years out of football for something he did, why not give Colin Kaepernick? I hate to even use the word second chance. Yeah. Second chance implies there's a need for a second chance. Why not be the one to bring him back after 3 years and give him an opportunity to get to where he otherwise would have been after being wrongfully denied employment the last 3 years?
And speaking to African-American who's still in the NFL, and he said last year, until the white stars get behind this, it won't have the movement, the momentum that we need. And now you're talking about Baker Mayfield and J.J. Watt and, a coach in the NFL who's willing to do this. I get the feeling that you might be in the minority if you're not kneeling on game day. What do you think is going to happen? And I know we got a lot of time before we get to September, but what do you think the sidelines are going to look like?
Well, it's funny. Justin Jackson of the Chargers last week made the comment that there's a chance by the time we get to September, there'll be no need to kneel because the change will be happening to the point where there isn't the importance to bring attention to the problem. But I think as of right now, based upon where we are, based upon where we likely will be in September, there will be a lot of people kneeling. And I loved Baker Mayfield's message because it's the message the NFL should have had from day one. I'm doing the right thing here. And if I lose fans over it, I don't care. The NFL's problem in 2017 is they feared that there would be a segment of the fan base that would turn away from them, and it would affect them in the pocketbook. It would affect them in the TV ratings. And to a certain extent, the anthem controversy did affect the NFL that year. The world is different, though, this time around. And I think the NFL needs to go back and throw away the playbook from 2017 and recognize that, you know what? First of all, anybody who does refuse to watch football, and a lot of people will say they refuse to watch and still watch, but if they are going to turn away from us, that's their problem. We don't want their business if that's how they think. If they refuse to understand that kneeling during the anthem isn't disrespect of the flag, the military, and the country. And secondly, maybe there is a net gain here, as I said earlier. We sell jerseys. We sell tickets. We develop a national following because we're the ones who stood up and did the right thing.
NBA season opener still on time, but where do we stand with fans in the stands?
Well, look, Dan, I'm concerned about the things that I'm hearing, and I know that the media has moved on to a large extent from the coronavirus, but when you see the spikes in some of these states and when you see states reopening and nightclubs packed with people and no masks in sight, I'm just concerned that when we get to September, it's going to be impossible to have fans at these games. I just hope that they can come up with procedures and protocols that the union, the league, the coaches, everybody are on the same page about. There's a protocol out there. The union hasn't agreed to it. John Harbaugh was complaining about it last week. They got a lot of work to do to come up with a system that gets everyone on the same page and that keeps the virus off of the playing field, out of the locker room and off of the playing field. That locker room is usually a petri dish and the playing field is worse. And they better have a good plan or they're going to get this thing started and it's going to fall apart by the end of September.
NFL owners on the clock here for that franchise tag. And can you say, I know that it's been Dak Prescott, and I know there are other players there, Ngakoue and A.J. Green here, but is there, like, the worst case scenario for the Cowboys with Dak Prescott is what?
Well, the worst case scenario is they don't get a deal done with him before July 15th, so they can't do a multi-year deal for 2020. Then he holds out of training camp in the preseason and shows up a week before the opener like Le'Veon Bell did 3 years ago. And the Cowboys have to decide, do we go with Andy Dalton, who's ready to go, or do we go with a guy who's just walked through the door? And if they don't do that long-term deal by July 15th, you've got Dak Prescott on the Kirk Cousins plan, where it's $31.4 million this year, $37.8 million next year. 2022, it's either $45 million if they use the transition tag, $54 million if they use the franchise tag a third time, or he walks away into free agency. And see, that's what this comes down to, Dan. It's a very simple analysis. What will the Cowboys offer Dak Prescott to give up $69 million over the next 2 years, plus a shot at free agency like Kirk Cousins got? What will it take to get him to trade that in? That's the challenge, and that's what the Cowboys have to answer. And they have to come up with enough to get him to trade in what he currently has in his hand.
Good to talk to you, Mike. Hope you're well. We appreciate your time as always.
All right, Dan. See you, buddy.
That's Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live, profootballtalk.com. Fritzy, what did you learn on today's program?
I learned that Scene doesn't really need to see what the other Danettes are cooking over the weekend. He's got other things he'd rather be looking at or doing.
Yeah, he didn't want to see Paulie's cooking, what he was cooking.
If Todd had sent a picture of his food, we'd be doing 3 straight months on that
Thank
picture.
you.
There would be a pixel by pixel breakdown of why Todd sent this picture.
Todd has to make a meal to send a picture of
That's
a meal
true.
that he made.
McLovin, what did you learn?
I learned all about Chris Mannix's kitchen today.
Yeah.
Seton, what did you learn?
Chris Mannix has a nice kitchen.
Never been used. Paulie?
First Atticus Finch mentioned on this show in history, I think.
What we learned brought to you by Raycon wireless earbuds. It's the way to go. Get 15% off your Raycon order at buyraycon.com/Patrick. That's buyraycon.com/Patrick. A lot of fun being back. Thanks for your participation. Going to do it again tomorrow. Talk to you then.